Good morning. We will be discussing Chapter 2 of our book, Identifying Your Intent. I'm Vinod Bogdanovich.
I'm Edward Chow.
I am Cho.
And we would like to discuss the importance of knowing your intent. I will be covering that. Edward will be doing the presentation objective. Ian will be doing the different purposes of our presentation, and we will conclude our presentation with a short video. First, before I begin, I'd like to ask you some questions. First question is, how many of us know what we're talking about by show of hands? Good. All right, question 2. How many of us think we know what we're talking about? All right. The reason why I ask these questions is because they're good to know, like, keep progress about your presentation. Things like mental notes, for example. You want to know, am I doing this right? Am I really connecting with the audience? Little things like that give you an idea of how to proceed. After all, you don't want to lose your audience before you even know what your own topic is. And now for the importance of knowing your intent. First off, who is your audience? You want to know the audience themselves. For example, are you discussing this with a bunch of corporate executives or high school students? Age, background, things like this make a difference when discussing. You also may have to alter your speech depending on your audience itself. Secondly, what are you trying to say? What do you want the audience to know? Think about your topic, your intent. Also, for example, if your topic is somewhat complicated and requires research, be sure to express that and show them make sure they understand it. Third thing is, how are you going to say this? Think about your structure, as I said earlier. For example, are you trying to inform them? Is this influencing? Are you trying to pitch something to them? Things like this make a difference. For example, for purpose, you need to think, what is the main goal of this? What do you want them to understand from the entire presentation? You may have to remind them towards the presentation, but not constantly remind them. You're not trying to constantly say it over and over, just once or twice. This is the main focus of your speech. One more thing is that what do you want from the audience themselves? Are you looking them to inform them? Do you want them to be aware of something, like maybe an event, or are you trying to propose a new product or ideas? Even things like, are you trying to gain insight from the audience to you? Like surveys, even the question I did earlier gives you an idea of how involved the audience is. And last but not least is the feedback of the audience. You want to know, how are they looking? Are they interested? Are they happy? Do they look excited to be there? You don't want them to look angry, confused, which is probably the worst. If your audience is confused, they're not going to understand your message. They might even misinterpret the entire thing, and you may lose them for the entire presentation. And now I'll turn to Edward, who will discuss the objective.
So before you even want to start writing your presentation, you want to figure out what an objective is. So what you think an objective is, like something like, it's like recap goals is what you think. But it's more than that. It's more like let's say like a timeline of what you're going to plan out. Make it a little bit easier for you to understand. So what exactly makes a successful objective? So a successful objective, first of all, has to have results. If you're just going to write a presentation and nothing comes out of it, that's just one ambiguous, vague presentation, then that's not really what we're trying to accomplish here. So when you're trying to be more results specific, you want to try to connect with your audience by saying something like, today I would like for you guys to understand, or as a result of today's presentation, I want you all to understand. That's the best way to approach it. Also, you want to make sure that you're more audience-oriented when you're talking. I don't know how many of y'all have had one speaker who starts off really great, but then Edward just starts rambling on, and you have no idea what's going on. That's certainly not why. So when you want to be more audience-oriented, you want to have more of stuff to connect with the audience, such as surveys or stories to tell them. Stuff like that helps connect with your audience better. Also, you want to know that different words have different meanings. What you say might not be exactly what the audience is thinking. They might be thinking a little bit differently. For example, 3 target words that usually cause conflict are think, feel, and do. And these 3 words usually present some challenges. For example, if you say something like, I think such and such goal should be accomplished, while you might be trying to interpret it as an opinionated basis, the audience might be thinking, oh, this is more of like something I should just recall, and I'm just sticking it at the back of your mind. The same goes for feel and do. Feel is more like an attitude versus an emotion basis, while do is more of a physical versus a mental capability. Also, you want to make sure to understand is your target measurable and attainable. This is because what you think, what the audience is thinking is not exactly what they might be thinking. For example, if you're talking pretty well and you think that you understand what the audience's emotions are, they might be thinking, oh, I think a little bit differently, but I'm not going to mention it just because I'm in the minority here. Or that people like to keep their opinions to themselves. They might be looking content, but actually they might have no idea what's going on. What is actually easier to understand is more like an action basis, where you try to read their faces, read their expressions, read what they're trying to say. That's usually a little, although it's not perfect, it's a little bit easier usually to understand. So what's the best way to get around this? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's best to try to tell stories or do something that causes something for debate or discussion. Something a little bit controversial might be great, but usually something that gets the audience talking and reacting to you is usually the best way to approach it. On the next slide, you want to make sure you want to stay focused with your objective. So how can you stay focused with your objective? Well, first off, plan early in advance. If you're going to plan the night before, it's probably not going to be as successful. You plan a couple weeks in advance, a couple months in advance, even if you have to. First off, you want to try to start early by figuring out how you're going to approach your objective. And this is usually best done if it's going to be a general summary, or it's going to be something like you're analyzing your audience, or more of a rhetorical question basis. That's the best way to approach it. Also, if you need to make modifications to your presentation objective, it needed before you start. For example, if you're giving a speech on information security and a new computer virus hits the 2 days before your presentation, you might want to include that in your presentation so you can discuss what's the best way to tackle it. So always be fluid and flexible to making modifications to your objective. Also, you want to present your presentation objective with an objective in mind. For example, you want to try to open and close your presentation in the same way, because that just shows organization. Also try to keep the main goals of your presentation in the same order. And finally, if you're going to use visual aids, make sure that you don't overdo it, just because having too many visual aids usually distract the audience from getting the main gist of your presentation. And also, you want to practice. Make sure to practice your presentation objectives so ahead of time you know what you're going to say. And if you need to, adjust during the presentation. Sometimes the audience might pose a question that you don't know too much of, so you want to be prepared just in case to work around that issue. And finally, evaluate your success. If everyone's cheering you, and when you think you did a horrible job, you want to be able to understand what's going on. So I'm going to pass on to Kyung now, who's going to discuss the 4 types of presentations.
So I'll talk about 4 purposes of presentation. They are tell, sell, concert, and join. These 4 types of presentation purposes are different in terms of how much control you have as a speaker and how much audience involvement you make. And first, in a tell situation, your main goal is to deliver content to inform. So you want your audience to remember your ideas at the end of the presentation. And in order to do that, you need to focus on general purposes like what, how, or who. Some example for this type of situation would be explain dividend to your shareholders, or explain your investor how to monitor your portfolio, or analyze the online customer. And our presentation could also fall into this category because we are here to deliver content, the chapter 2 content to improve you guys. The next slide will be the sales situation. In a sales situation, your goal is to change an attitude or behaviors of your audience. You want them to accept your ideas and make some change. And in order to do that, you really need to focus on why your proposal is important and why it should be done. This is because usually when people are asked to change, they usually have some resistance against it. So one of the ways to ease that resistance is to create an involvement. You you may want to have some question and answer session in your presentation or have some time to listen to your audience's concern. The example for this situation would be convincing your executive to relocate the headquarter office. Moving the office is a lot of work, so you have to you have to convince them why it's important and why it should be done at this time. The next two situation is concert and join. We combine these two situations because they have similarity in that they both focus on audience involvement. In both situations, you turn the center stage from you to your audience. So in a concert situation, you should focus on question and answer sessions. You have to listen actively to your audiences, what they have to say about the matter. And in a joint situation, you have to ask your audience to generate ideas and critiques. And it is best when you have your audience work as a small group to create that. And so the example for this situation would be our current presentation with every class. So every group come up and explain some of the basic facts about the current event. Then they present some discussion questions so that all the classmates could participate and generate some ideas. Next, we will move on to a short video from the nod for talk about it.
Thank you. We're going to pick the video by former President Ronald Reagan. Hope you guys enjoy.
Today I say, as long as this gate is closed, as long as this scar of a wall is permitted to stand, it is not the German question alone that remains open, but the question of freedom for all mankind. In the 1950s, Khrushchev predicted, "We will bury you." But in the West today, we see a free world that has achieved a level of prosperity and well-being unprecedented in all human history. In the communist world, we see failure. There is one sign the Soviets can make that would be unmistakable, that would advance dramatically the cause of freedom and peace. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
As you can see, we picked him because he was a great speaker. That speech was very famous. I know you didn't hear the whole thing, but his intent was very clear to understand, even though it was like the last few minutes. He also took this thing very seriously. He wasn't smiling. He also wanted to be taken seriously, very stern. He had good posture the entire time. He had good eye contact with the crowd. He also avoided talking with his hands, like I'm doing right now. He wanted, overall, he just wanted Reagan to understand his message. Even though it was specifically for Gorbachev himself, it could be for like anyone. That was intended for the whole world to hear. So his audience could be interchangeable depending on how the way you want it to be. Overall, this concludes our presentation, and now we'd like to begin the quiz.
Will one of you please read the quiz questions?
For the first question is the triangle. I'm sure you've all seen it by now. Just fill in the blank at the top part. The second question is the telepurpose is to deliver content to the blank of the audience. Question 3, the 3 types of target for speeches are think, feel, and question 4. What is the primary focus of consult and join purposes? And the last question is, which purpose category does Ronald Reagan's speech fall into?